Welcome back, guys, to Blackout War Stories. 60% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. January 6, 2004, Cascade County, Montana, 2:07 hours. The wind cut straight through the Nomex. Static popped in the headset from frozen cables. Red strobes blinked across the pad, one every 2 seconds, painting the snow with thin color that never reached the horizon. PLA alarm from launch facility, Lima 09. No maintenance scheduled. No airmen logged outside the gate. I was the closest unit, alone on patrol. The truck idled behind a line of drifts, its exhaust trailing a white flag into the dark. The temperature sat around -20. My breath hit the visor and frosted. Through the thermal scope, something moved along the inner fence. Too low for a person, too big for a coyote. It paced in a straight line, head level with its back, each stride long and even. The perimeter light flickered once, then went dark. I keyed the mic. Static answered. The wind shifted, carrying a smell I had never caught out there before iron and wet hide. I clicked the rifle's safety down and moved toward the fence. The snow under my boots squeaked like broken glass. Each step took me closer to the thing that had set off the alarm. When you spend enough nights in the missile fields, the quiet starts to feel heavy. It presses against you until you almost hear it breathing. The planes out there don't echo. They absorb sound. Snow, wheat stubble, and cold open ground. Nothing but horizon in every direction. I was with the 341st Security Forces group out of Malmstrom. We guarded the missile silos spread across north-central Montana. Each silo or launch facility sat miles apart, connected by empty county roads and barbed wire. Most nights were routine. Drive your sector, check fences, log alarms, and keep the deterrent safe. But in winter, routine could kill you faster than an intruder. You learned to stay alert, even when nothing moved. That night, my call sign was Lima 27. I had been in for almost 6 years. One deployment to the Middle East, then reassignment stateside. The missile field felt quiet, but it demanded discipline. One mistake could trigger a lockdown or worse. 2 weeks before the alarm, we'd started getting strange reports from ranchers near the perimeter. Cattle found dead, cleanly opened. Some said it was wolves, but no tracks matched. Coyotes maybe, but even they left more mess. A few locals used an old name, Shunka Warakin. I didn't pay attention to stories. I believed in what I could see through a scope or read in a report. Still, the talk reached the unit. A few guys joked about it in the ready room. Others said they'd seen shapes near the outer fences, too big to be coyotes. I stayed quiet. Out there, your imagination could turn windblown grass into a figure. Our standard loadout was the same every night. M4 carbine, M9 sidearm, 2 mags each, radio, thermal monocular, cold weather layers, and a medical pouch. The truck was a Chevy HD pickup modified for patrol. Kevlar panels in the doors, spotlight, and rack mounts for rifles. We checked everything before leaving base because once you were 2 hours out, there was no help. Each LF had a double fence. The outer was tall chain link with concertina wire. The inner surrounded the launch door and sensor field. Any breach, animal or human, tripped the perimeter lighting alarm, the PLA. Most of those alarms came from deer or drifting snow-hitting sensors. We called them ghost trips, but even a ghost had to be checked. That night, I started my patrol at 10 p.m. The radio was quiet. I drove the loop through the northwest sector, flat, featureless terrain. Only distant lights from ranches and 1 or 2 passing rigs on Highway 87. Around 2340, I got a call about a small herd moving near Mike 12. I checked. Just deer. Wind picked up around midnight. By 1:30, I was heading south toward Lima sites. That's when the dispatcher called. PLA alarm, Lima 09, East Perimeter. I acknowledged and marked my position. I was about 12 minutes away. Protocol said to wait for backup if closer than 15 miles, but the other patrol was still at a maintenance escort. I was it. The drive out took me over an open plateau where the road disappeared under drifts. I kept the truck in 4-wheel drive and followed the snow stakes by headlight. The radio hissed every time I tried to call in. The cold messed with signal. I made mental notes. If comms failed entirely, I'd run visual confirmation and secure the site until another team arrived. When I reached the access road, I cut the lights and parked behind a berm. I stepped out, rifle slung, and the cold hit like a shock. The air felt solid. Breathing hurt. The pad was about 300 meters ahead, faint red strobes still pulsing. I walked slow, scanning the horizon through the thermal. At first, nothing. Then a faint heat bloom near the fence line, low and wide. I thought it might be a mule deer. But deer don't walk the fence like that. They bound, freeze, look around. This one moved with purpose, head level, tail down. I watched it circle once and stop beside the hatch cover. That's when I noticed something else. Tracks in the snow leading from the county road straight to the fence. Big, heavy impressions. No tire marks, just footprints. Deep, long, and spaced too far apart for a normal stride. The radio crackled again. Lima 27, status? I answered. Visual movement inside outer perimeter, investigating. The shape moved again, slow, steady. I took a knee and watched, my finger brushing the trigger guard, ready if it turned toward the gate. The snow around me whispered in the wind. Every breath came out as mist. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down again, waiting for what came next. I stayed low and watched the fence through the scope. The shape kept circling the pad, moving between the floodlight shadows. I could not make out a head or tail, just a long body. I waited for a second return, maybe a thermal reflection, but the image stayed solid. Backup was still 30 minutes out. The other patrol was escorting a missile crew 2 grids away. The flight security controller told me to hold position until the team cleared and could support. I gave a quick copy, but I knew I could not just sit and watch. If something damaged the fence or reached the hatch, I would answer for it. I started forward, slow steps, careful with noise. My breath fogged inside the mask. The only sounds were wind through the fence and my boots pressing into crusted snow. I could smell oil from the generator shed. The pad lights flickered with the wind. I felt the cold climb through my gloves into my fingers. The tracks outside the gate caught my eye again. Big prints, wider than my hand. The gate looked off, like something dragging a little weight. Each step punched deep into the hard snow, meaning whatever made them was heavy. I followed the line with the beam from my light until it curved out toward the coulee. There were stories about wild dogs crossing from Canada, crossbreeds that lived off calves and deer. I had seen wolf prints before. These were larger. Maybe someone's escaped hybrid. That was the most logical answer. Still, the way the prints came straight from the road bothered me. No wandering, no hesitation. Straight line to the site, then around the hatch. I checked the fence for damage. Nothing. Just a few bent wires near the base where snow packed against it. I brushed the wire and found coarse hair caught on the braid. It was longer than coyote fur, almost black. I kept a small evidence bag in my pouch and took a sample, more out of habit than procedure. My flashlight beam caught the inner fence beyond the drift. The shape was still moving, slow but steady. I raised the thermal again. The outline flickered once, then resolved. Not a man, not a deer. It was too low in the shoulders, too level across the spine. I could not place it. My fingers had gone numb from the cold. I flexed them and keyed the radio again. Still visual inside the inner perimeter, I said. Movement is continuous, unknown classification. No visual on entry point. The reply came through thin and static filled. Copy, hold position, avoid engagement until positive ID. That was easy to say from a warm control room. Out there, decisions were seconds long and permanent. I moved along the outer fence to get a better view. The snow creaked under my boots. A gust hit from the north, sharp and dry. For a moment, the clouds broke and moonlight cut through. That was when I saw 2 more sets of tracks joining the first. Smaller, lighter, but same stride pattern. 3 animals, maybe more. The thought of a pack near a live site turned my stomach. Coyotes never moved like that. They scattered when they sensed people. These moved with purpose. I kept my rifle low and steady. The scope picked up heat again, faint but real. The first figure stopped near the center of the pad and looked toward the outer fence, where I stood. It stayed that way for a long time. At that distance, under those conditions, you learn how small you really are. You think about the sealed door a few meters below that thing's feet. You think about what you're supposed to defend, What could happen if even one mistake goes unreported? I clicked the radio again, requesting second confirmation on response ETA. Silence. Then a burst of static and a broken word. The wind had swallowed the signal. I was alone in that field, with only red strobes and moving shadows to remind me the world hadn't stopped. I adjusted my grip and checked the magazine by feel. My watch showed 2:06. The shape began to move again, heading away from the hatch and toward the eastern fence line, the one nearest the access road where my truck waited. That was when I noticed a second heat signature flicker behind it, smaller and slower, two of them close together. I steadied the scope and watched as they slipped into the drift by the fence. My chest felt tight. I didn't know if I was looking at animals or something I'd have to report under a different code entirely. I turned toward the truck to reposition. The snow hissed under my boots. I felt the wind shift again and carry that same smell, iron and musk, old and sharp. I caught one last glimpse of movement near the drift. Then the lights on the pad blinked out, one by one, until I was standing in total dark. And that was when I knew something had changed. The moment the lights went out, the field turned into a void. The red strobes stopped flashing. The only light came from the moon, dull and half hidden behind clouds. My eyes adjusted fast, but the shadows on the snow all looked alive. I switched the truck's headlights to blackout mode and moved toward the access road. I didn't want my silhouette against the fence. I crouched and scanned again through the thermal. Two returns still inside the inner fence, close together now. Their body heat pulsed slow, like large mammals at rest. The generator should have kicked on when power dropped. It didn't. That was the first thing that told me this wasn't just an animal alarm. Someone had to pull a breaker or disable a relay. My boots crunched softly as I crossed to the east side of the pad. The snow here was thinner, swept clean by the wind. The tracks leading in looked newer, one set pressed deeper than before, as if whatever made it had returned heavier or slower. I followed it along the fence line until I reached a section where the lower braid had snapped. I crouched. The brake wasn't clean. The wire was twisted and pulled outward, like something forced its way through instead of biting or cutting it. The edges were shiny, fresh metal, not rusted. I raised the thermal again. One figure now. The smaller heat signature was gone. The larger one stood still, just inside the broken section. My heart started to hammer. At that range, maybe 80 meters, I could hear the faint sound of breathing through the wind. Deep, steady, almost human in rhythm. I took a step forward, then stopped. The shape turned its head toward me. Not a full face, just a line of movement in the dark. The thermal image burned bright, long head, narrow muzzle, and ears small and tight against the skull. Its posture was wrong for a coyote. It didn't slouch. It stood with its shoulders high, like it was ready to move. The radio crackled again for a second. A voice cut through the static, unreadable, then gone. I didn't answer. My breath came slow and even. I knew the rules. Do not engage until you can identify the threat. But standing there alone, with that thing watching me through a fence we both knew, meant nothing. That rule felt far away. A low growl carried on the wind, not a warning. More like a sound to test distance. I steadied my rifle, kept the barrel down. The clouds shifted again, and a strip of moonlight hit the snow between us. The creature stepped forward once, then stopped with one paw on the inner fence. Its back rose high, fur bristled down the spine like a ridge. I could see ribs move under the hide when it breathed. It looked half-starved but strong. My throat went dry. I spoke into the mic again, soft. Unknown animal, inside perimeter, possible breach on east fence. Holding position? No answer. The figure took another step, slower this time, and angled toward the north fence line. It wasn't running away. It was circling me. I backed up one pace at a time, careful not to break rhythm. My boots slipped on the crust. I looked once over my shoulder and caught a faint beam in the distance. Headlights, maybe a ranch truck, or backup finally closing in. When I looked back, the creature was gone. No heat return, no sound, nothing. The silence hit hard again. Then I saw movement near the drift, maybe 20 meters ahead. Something small and dark crawled out and slumped against the snow. It stayed there, barely moving. I tightened my grip on the rifle and moved toward it, slow and steady. The cold stung my face. The smell returned, stronger now, iron and something like burned plastic. Halfway there, the larger shape reappeared between me and the smaller one, moving low to the ground but fast. It didn't charge. It just stopped between us, head low, chest heaving. We stared at each other across that strip of frozen ground, two figures caught under the same thin light. Then the wind changed again, and I heard a sound behind me, an engine. The sound of that engine froze me for a second. It wasn't my backup. It came from outside the perimeter, on the county road. I turned and saw faint headlights moving slow, with no high beams. The truck stopped near the fence, about 200 meters away. The shape in front of me didn't move. It watched the lights just like I did. Its head lifted slightly, like it recognized the sound. I lowered my rifle a little, trying to listen. The pickup engine idled steady, then shut off. The driver door opened. A figure stepped out. Heavy coat, hood up, hands in pockets. Too dark to see a face. The person walked to the fence, stopped short of the wire, and just stood there. For a few seconds, no one moved. The wind cut between us, pushing thin snow across the road. Then the man raised one arm and flashed a handheld light twice, short, then long. Not random, a signal. The animal inside the fence shifted its stance, almost like it understood. The smaller one behind it tried to lift its head. I could hear a low noise, not a growl, more like a short whine. The man turned back to the truck and waved. Another figure climbed out. This one carried something long, maybe a rifle or pole. They walked along the fence, slow, searching. I brought my rifle back up and keyed the mic. Two unknown civilians on outer fence. Vehicle unmarked. Possible coordination with intruding animals, static again. No answer. The lead animal turned halfway toward me. Its body blocked the smaller one, shielding it from my line of sight. It didn't look scared, only alert. Every time I moved, it adjusted, like it was protecting the other one. My training said to protect the site first. People or animals near a nuclear fence line could mean sabotage or testing our response times. The civilians outside added another layer. I moved left, keeping the fence between us. The snow came up to my knees in places. The cold cut deep through the uniform. I couldn't feel my fingertips anymore. The truck lights flashed once, and I saw the metal outline of a large cage in the bed. The second man opened the tailgate and dropped it down. The first pulled something from his coat and tossed it over the fence. It landed near the animals with a dull thud. The big one lowered its head, sniffed, and didn't move closer. It turned back to me again. That was when I realized those men weren't poachers. They weren't lost. They came for the animals. I stepped forward, raised my voice just enough to carry. "This is restricted property. Step away from the fence." No reaction. The wind carried my words sideways. The man with the light froze, then slowly pointed it toward me. The beam hit my vest, reflecting off the ID patch. He must have seen the uniform because he turned to his partner and shouted something I couldn't hear. They backed toward the truck, fast but not running. Inside the fence, the animal started to move again. The smaller one tried to stand, slipped, and fell back. The larger one stayed between us, body tense, tail straight out. The civilians reached their truck and climbed in. The headlights flicked on. They started backing down the road, not turning around, just retreating slow. I took another step toward the fence, rifle at low ready. The bigger animal followed their movement with its head, not mine. Then just before the truck disappeared behind the hill, the animal let out a sound I've never heard before. A deep, drawn-out cry that echoed across the snowfield. When it ended, everything was still again. The truck was gone. The wind carried nothing but the hum of the perimeter lights trying to restart. I stood there, breathing through my mask, watching the two shapes fade back into the drift. One moved, the other didn't. I checked my watch. 02:11. That was the moment I stopped believing this was a wildlife issue, and it was the moment I realized I wasn't the only one hunting that night. I stayed where I was until the sound of the truck faded completely. The field was quiet again, but I could still feel the engine vibrations in my chest. It was the kind of silence that doesn't last long. You start listening too hard, waiting for something to break it. I turned back toward the pad. The bigger animal had moved. It was now standing halfway between the hatch and the fence break, head low, breath rising in short bursts. The smaller one was gone. I didn't see it move off, but the snow near the drift showed a trail leading away toward the coulee. I scanned the area through the thermal. Nothing but faint heat from the fence posts. I swung back to the east fence and picked up another return, not inside this time, but out by the county fence where the truck had been. A person standing still. Not one of the two who drove off. This figure was taller, alone facing the site. I crouched and adjusted the focus. The heat signature didn't move, just stood there for nearly 30 seconds, then dropped out of view as if it stepped down into the ditch. I called it in again, this time to the alternate frequency. Lima 27, possible third civilian near east perimeter, requesting immediate support. I waited, still static. That's when I felt it, vibration through the ground, faint but real, not from the truck. This was steady, rhythmic, like something moving heavy equipment underground. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. I glanced at the launch hatch. No visual changes, no light, no motion. Still, that vibration didn't belong. The silo doors were locked solid, hydraulic system sealed. Nothing should be active unless authorized. For a moment, I thought it was my own heartbeat echoing through the frozen ground. But when it stopped, the silence felt heavier, like the field was holding its breath. I moved closer to the broken fence. The wire glinted under the moonlight. The big animal was still there, pacing slow circles. It didn't look at me anymore. Its head kept turning toward the direction the truck had gone, as if waiting for someone to return. I switched the thermal off and tried the binoculars instead. The natural light gave me a clearer outline. The body was long and lean, but the head seemed wrong. Too stretched, jawline longer than any dog I'd seen. The fur along the spine stood up in a thick ridge, almost mane-like. I thought about shooting then, just a single round into the dirt to scare it off. But something in the way it moved stopped me. It wasn't just standing there, it was thinking, watching, choosing. The smaller one appeared again near the coulee, dragging its back leg. The big one saw it and limped toward it, not away from me. They met near the fence corner and stayed close, heads down together. The temperature had dropped fast. My breath froze to the mic. The radio finally cracked open again, faint and broken. Lima 27, copy your last. Repeat. Civilians? I keyed up. Affirmative, unknown civilians observed. 2 departed eastbound, possible third still on site. Multiple large animals within perimeter, unknown species. Request QRF. The reply came through, weak but clear enough. Copy. Response rolling from Launch Control Center. ETA 30 minutes. Hold position. 30 minutes felt like forever in that cold. I pulled my scarf higher and watched the fence line. The animals had stopped moving again. Their heat signatures were faint, like their bodies were cooling fast. I started thinking about the men in that truck, the cage and the bed, the way the animals reacted when they showed up. That wasn't random. Those men weren't chasing, they were collecting. I remembered something from a training brief years ago, a project up north where contractors were testing hybrid working dogs for tracking in subarctic terrain. They bred them to move quietly, long distances, no need for shelter. The program shut down after rumors of behavioral instability. Most of us laughed it off, but looking at the shapes by that fence, I didn't feel like laughing. A dull pop echoed from the west fence metal contracting in the cold. Maybe, or not. The animals' heads snapped up in unison, both facing that direction. Then, without warning, the larger one broke into a sprint, vanishing into the dark beyond the pad lights. The smaller one followed, slower, limping but determined. I turned to track them but caught movement in my periphery, the third figure. Now closer, standing just beyond the outer fence. It raised a hand, palm open, like it wanted me to hold fire. Then it stepped back into the shadows and disappeared into the coulee after the animals. That was the last thing I saw before backup arrived. And by the time they reached me, there was nothing left but broken snow, dead radio silence, and the faint hum of a fence trying to wake back up. The quick reaction force rolled in at 2:43. 2 trucks, lights off, engines muffled by the cold. I flagged them down from the access road, rifles slung, hand raised. The flight chief stepped out first, a solid man named Weller. He looked at me, then at the fence. "What have we got?" he asked. "Two animals inside the inner perimeter. Unknown type. Civilians outside earlier. Possibly three. They're gone." He didn't answer right away. He looked through his thermal and frowned. "You sure you weren't looking at elk?" I shook my head. Too low. Too coordinated. They weren't running from me. He didn't push it. "All right, let's clear the area." The other patrol, two younger airmen, started checking the fence line. One of them found the broken braid and called it in. Weller examined it up close, then ran a glove over the wire. Something heavy pulled this. Not a coyote. He ordered one truck to sweep the outer perimeter. I followed him inside the gate with the second team. The snow had filled half the tracks already, but you could still see the pattern, deep prints, wide spacing. The stride looked deliberate, almost human in rhythm. We followed the trail until it split near the coulee. One line veered north, the other south. Weller told us to track the closer one. I took point. The snow reflected enough light to move without flashlights. We walked in a staggered line, rifles up, scanning both sides. It didn't take long to find the first sign. Hair caught in the lower wire again, but this time mixed with blood. I knelt down and touched the snow. Still warm. "Contact's recent," I said. We pushed forward another 50 meters. The wind came hard from the north, bringing the smell again. Stronger, thicker, like wet fur and iron. Then the airman behind me whispered, "Movement, 10 o'clock." I turned and caught it in my peripheral, a shape moving through the drift, low and fast. I raised my rifle, but Weller stopped me with a hand. "Hold. Could be wounded wildlife." The shape stopped at the edge of a shallow ravine. The moonlight caught part of it. Long body, deep chest, black fur along the ridge. Its front paw pressed down slow, careful. It wasn't panicked. It was thinking. We spread out, forming a loose line. Weller lifted his radio. "Command, we have visual on possible hostile animal. Attempting containment." He never finished the sentence. The thing bolted straight up the ravine wall and vanished behind the rise. Not running away, just gone. No sound. No echo. Nothing. We moved after it, careful, rifles sweeping. The snow softened our steps, but the silence was worse. You could hear the blood in your ears. At the top of the rise, we stopped. Below us stretched open land, pale and endless. No movement anywhere. Weller cursed under his breath, then pointed to a patch of churned snow near the fence. A dark lump lay half buried there. We approached slow, muzzles down. It was the smaller one, the injured animal, dead. Its body curled around itself like it had just gone to sleep. No blood trail, no sign of a fight. Weller motioned me closer. "Check for tag." I knelt beside it and lifted the foreleg with my glove. There was a scar on the inner thigh, faint but deliberate. Numbers tattooed into the skin. They looked like part of a code. I called it out. "Marking present, not wildlife." Weller stared for a long second. "Then what the hell are we looking at?" Before I could answer, a sound cracked through the dark. Metal hitting metal. Not a gunshot. The outer fence behind us flexed, like something heavy had struck it. We spun around, rifles up. The sound came again, closer this time. The red strobes flickered to life for half a second, lighting the snow like blood. And there it was, standing behind the inner fence, right where the alarm had started hours ago. The larger one. It was watching us. It stood tall, chest heaving, steam rising from its mouth. The ridge of fur along its back bristled against the cold wind. Every breath sounded wet and deep. It wasn't just standing there. It was judging distance, picking targets. Weller froze beside me, rifle halfway up. "Don't shoot unless it moves," he said quietly. The two younger airmen spread left, trying to flank. Their boots broke the crusted snow with sharp cracks. The animal's head turned, eyes catching the red strobe light. For a second, I thought I saw a reflection like glass. But it wasn't eyeshine. It was intelligence. Then it moved. A blur across the snow, straight for the fence. The sound of claws biting through wire tore through the night. It hit the inner braid, twisted, and rolled through. The fence bowed inward with a snap. One of the airmen yelled and stumbled back. Weller shouted, Engage! 3 rifles fired almost at once. Short bursts, controlled. The sound cracked across the plains and vanished into the dark. The thing kept coming. It didn't charge upright. It came low, gliding over the snow like it had no weight. I fired a controlled pair center mass. The first round hit. I saw the impact. Snow puffing off its side. It staggered but didn't fall. Weller fired again, closer this time. The creature twisted mid-stride and slammed into the snow less than 10 meters from the smaller body we'd found. It slid and stopped, breathing ragged. The world went still again except for the sound of the fence wire swaying. We kept our rifles on it. Weller called out, "Hold fire!" "Maintain eyes." I lowered my sights slightly. The animal twitched once, twice. Then it lifted its head and made a low sound, something between a growl and a breath. It wasn't angry. It was calling. The younger airman stepped closer. "Sir, it's dying." Weller didn't answer. He just stared at it. The animal's front paw dragged across the snow toward the smaller body. It pressed its head against it, slow and gentle, before its breathing stopped completely. The cold swallowed everything. We approached carefully. I kept my rifle ready, barrel down. The 2 bodies lay close together, almost touching. Even in death, the larger one's foreleg draped across the smaller like it was shielding it. Up close, I could finally see what we'd been looking at. Its fur was coarse, thick in the ridge but patchy along the sides, showing scars old and deep. The head shape was wrong for any known species. Too long in the snout, eyes set slightly forward. Its teeth were blunted, worn, not wild. Weller crouched beside it, scanning the flank with his flashlight. He found another tattoo, partly faded, same font as the smaller one. "That's not a random number," he said. "That's a program code." He looked up at me. "Take photos." "Bag samples. None of this goes on the radio yet." I took out the camera from my kit and started shooting frame by frame. Hair, paws, head, the tattoos. My hands shook, not from cold anymore. Weller stood and keyed the radio on encrypted. "Command, we have 2 deceased large canids, both marked, both inside the security perimeter. Request containment and vet retrieval. Site remains secure." The reply came after a long pause. "Copy Lima section. Containment team en route. Do not broadcast further traffic." That was all they said. We waited. No one spoke. The sky began to pale at the horizon. When the containment truck arrived, the men who stepped out didn't wear security forces patches. Their uniforms were plain, with no names. They moved fast and quiet, avoiding our eyes. They loaded the bodies into sealed tarps, tagged them with coded markers, and left without signing a chain of custody log. When Weller asked for paperwork, one of them said, "It's already filed." We stood there in silence until the sound of their truck faded down the access road. By 5:10, the field was empty again. The wind had erased every print except ours. The only proof left was the broken fence, 2 blood patches in the snow, and a few dark hairs still tangled in the wire. Weller looked at me before we left. "You didn't see wolves tonight. You understand?" I nodded, but the look on his face told me he didn't believe that either. That drive back to the flight area was the longest of my life. The sky turned gray behind us. The field stretched on, silent, endless. I kept my hand tight on the wheel the whole way, trying not to think about the sound those things made before they died. We reached the flight area around dawn. The heater in the truck was barely working. My fingers ached from gripping the steering wheel too long. None of us talked on the way back. The silence was heavier than the cold. Inside the command building, everything looked normal. Coffee steaming, radios humming, day shift walking in half asleep. You could almost believe the night hadn't happened. We signed our rifles back in and met in the debrief room. Weller sat across from me, rubbing his eyes. The 2 younger airmen looked pale, still shaken. The duty officer, a captain I didn't know well, walked in with a clipboard. He looked calm, too calm. He started the recorder and said, "Let's go over this once." I gave my report as clean as I could. Times, positions, number of contacts, number of shots fired. I described the animals, the fence damage, and the civilian truck. When I mentioned the tattoos, the captain stopped writing for a moment, then said, "You're sure about that?" "Yes, sir. I saw them up close, same format on both. He wrote something, then closed his folder. Good. Keep your statements consistent. We'll classify the event as wildlife intrusion and unauthorized civilian presence. Any details about markings or behavior will go under a restricted report. That was it. No questions about what I saw, no curiosity about what they were, just protocol and paperwork. After the debrief, Weller pulled me aside in the hallway. His face was tired. "They'll clean it up," he said quietly. "That's how these things go. You did your job. Don't second guess it." I nodded, but it didn't feel right. I had fired my weapon. I had ended something alive that wasn't supposed to exist, and now it was being boxed up in a file marked routine. Later that morning, a civilian-looking van pulled into the compound. 2 men got out wearing base visitor badges. They asked for our flight chief and carried sealed containers. When they left, I saw one label through the frost: Biohazard Federal Transfer. That evening, I went to the motor pool to check the patrol truck. The front tires were coated in frozen mud from the site. Stuck in the tread was a tuft of black hair. I pulled it free and stared at it for a long time. The strands were coarse, almost oily. I bagged it and slipped it into my duffel without thinking. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the 2 bodies lying side by side. The way the larger one had covered the smaller with its foreleg. It wasn't a wild act. It looked deliberate, protective. Over the next week, the story spread around the unit. Officially, we'd shot 2 coyotes that breached a fence. That was the version everyone repeated. A few guys asked questions. I gave short answers and changed the subject. 3 days later, Wildlife Services filed a report saying they couldn't confirm species identification due to damage and sample contamination. That line made it into the daily summary. After that, the matter disappeared. Then Weller was reassigned to administrative duty. The 2 younger airmen were transferred to another squadron. I stayed in patrol rotation. The base never mentioned Lima 09 again. Winter dragged on. More alarms came and went, all of them false. The kind of nights where the silence gets inside your head and you start to feel watched again. One afternoon, about a month later, I stopped at a ranch near the edge of our sector. The owner was an older man named Keating. He was fixing a fence and waved me over. He asked if we ever found what was killing his cattle. I told him it was probably wolves. He nodded slowly and said, "My granddad used to call them something else." "What's that?" I asked. He squinted at the horizon. "Shunka Warakin. Said they hunted in pairs. Said you never saw the 3rd one till it was too late." I didn't answer. Just thanked him for the coffee and left. That night, I sat in my quarters with the evidence bag in my hand. The hair still looked dark and solid, even under fluorescent light. I almost turned it in, but something stopped me. I sealed it back and locked it in my footlocker instead. I told myself it was just a reminder, but deep down, I knew it was proof. Proof of what we saw, even if no one would ever admit it. A few weeks later, I was sent back out to Lima 09. Routine inspection, nothing special. Just a cold afternoon with flat light and the steady wind. I drove the same road, past the same drifted fences, and parked at the same access point. Everything looked normal. The fence had been replaced, new sensors installed, new warning signs. No trace of what happened that night. Still, when I stepped out of the truck, it felt different, like the ground remembered. I walked the perimeter with the checklist: gate secure, power stable, cameras aligned, standard procedure. But when I reached the eastern fence, I stopped. There, just beyond the wire, something caught the light. It was a single bone fragment, small about the size of a finger, clean, sun-bleached. I picked it up and turned it over. Could have been anything, probably from livestock. But the shape of the end, almost like a paw joint, made my stomach twist. I placed it back exactly where I found it. That night, I wrote a supplemental report. Nothing dramatic, just a note about erosion and debris near the fence. I left out the bone. There were things better left unwritten. A month after that, I got called into the commander's office. He told me I was being moved to base security operations, said I'd done good work in the field and it was time for a change. His tone was calm, but his eyes said it wasn't a request. After I left the room, I saw Weller in the hallway. He didn't look surprised. "They're closing the book on it," he said. "Best thing you can do is let it stay closed." I tried for a while, but small things kept coming back. A note in a classified training packet mentioning unauthorized biological assets. A maintenance crew talking about strange readings on buried sensors near Lima sites. A story about a black van seen out near a wildlife preserve 2 counties away. Each time I wanted to ask questions, each time I didn't. By spring, most of the unit had rotated out. The winter stories faded like they always did. New crews came in. The old files were archived. Lima 09 stopped tripping alarms. I stayed on for another year before transferring. When I cleared out my locker, I found that small evidence bag again. The hair inside had changed. It was brittle, gray at the edges, but it still carried a faint smell when I opened it, metallic, dry like the air that night. I sealed it again and tucked it into my field jacket pocket. That was the last thing I kept from my time there. Years later, when people ask about strange stories in the missile fields, I tell them most of it is nonsense. Animals, weather, bored troops seeing shapes in the dark. That's the line I use because it's easier. But sometimes when I'm driving alone on open roads in winter, I see something in the distance that makes me slow down, a dark shape standing still, watching from the edge of a coulee. Always alone, never running. I keep driving. I don't stop. Because deep down, I know what I saw that night wasn't just wildlife. It wasn't random. It wasn't a legend either. It was something real that someone made, then lost, and chose to bury under reports in cold ground. And maybe they didn't find the third one. It's been over 15 years since that night. I've been out of uniform for most of them. Civilian life moves quiet, slower, but sometimes I still wake up at 2:07 without knowing why. That's the time the alarm went off at Lima 09. I live about an hour from the old missile fields now. Sometimes I drive out that way just to clear my head. The silos are still there, same fences, same dirt roads. Most people passing through don't even notice them. They just see open land. One winter, I stopped at a diner near Great Falls. A park ranger was talking with a trucker about large animal tracks found near a frozen creek bed. He said they didn't match any known print in the area. Big stride, no claw marks, deep impressions even on packed ice. I didn't join the conversation. I just listened. When they left, I finished my coffee and drove north. The sky was pale gray, the kind that never brightens. I reached a high ridge and looked down at the empty fields. Snow covered everything. Nothing moved. Still, I felt that same quiet pressure in the air, the weight that comes before something happens. I thought about those 2 animals lying side by side, the mark on their skin, the sound that came from their throats. I thought about the man on the road signaling with his light. All of it sits in a file somewhere, sealed behind codes and stamps. But memory doesn't seal that easily. The reports won't say how it felt to stand there alone, rifle cold in your hands, watching something that shouldn't exist, breathe the same air as you. Sometimes I wonder if they found the third one. Sometimes I hope they didn't, because whatever it wasn't just a story the locals made up. It was real. It had purpose, and it looked at me the same way I looked at it, with recognition. Out there, on that frozen night in Montana, we both learned something we were never supposed to know. And I've spent every year since trying not to remember and failing. Don't turn off the light now. If the story chilled you, subscribe to Blackout War Stories. And for more horror, the next nightmares are waiting on your screen.